Welcome to the Sex Talk Cafe, where the mission is to normalize the conversation on sexuality while providing you with a real education on sex, intimacy, and relationships. You know, the one you never got in school, from your parents, friends, or the internet. I'm your host, Susan Morgan-Taylor. Let's get down to it. Welcome to the Sex Talk Cafe. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sex Talk Cafe. I'm super excited for my guest today, Venus Ohara. Venus is quite the powerhouse. I'm going to have her introduce herself in just a moment, but I would love to announce our topic for today. Today, we're going to be diving into orgasmic manifestation, and Venus Ohara is the go-to expert on this. She's written several books on the topic, and we're really going to dive in and have a juicy conversation about how you can drop into your pleasure and use it for manifestation and personal and spiritual growth. So Venus, welcome to the Sex Talk Cafe.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do, and how do we find you where you are today with this orgasmic manifestation?
Well, I'm a sexual wellness content creator. I started my blog in 2009. I was at a very desperate time. I was working in real estate and I had a rat infestation. I had no money. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to become a sex blogger like you do. Because I kind of, I hit rock bottom and then I kind of lost the fear. Because I think, making content about sexuality online is quite a daring thing, even though people just think of it as frivolous, but it's actually a very big personal sacrifice. So that was my best option in 2009. And I didn't have a kind of business plan as such. So things started unfolding for me in many organic ways. I was working for many media outlets, press, such as GQ, Playboy, El País here in Spain. I'm British, but I live in Spain. And then over time, I started to receive lots of sex toys because of my media profile. Then I became a sex toy reviewer, designer. And then I discovered Orgasmic Manifestation back in 2018, just throughout another desperate times. I had no pillows and no sofa, but I had 300 sex toys, So I was living a life of contrasts. I started looking for things online, and then I thought, I can use my orgasm to manifest. And I got myself out of a very bad situation, and now I have 5 pillows and a much bigger apartment.
Awesome. And so I've heard the term sex magic. And can you just describe, is orgasmic, I keep wanting to say a different word, manifestation, not meditation. Orgasmic manifestation, is it essentially like sex magic, or is it something different?
Is exactly the same. There's several ways of describing it. One term that's become very popular now is the O method. As you may be aware, on social media, we can't use words like sex or orgasmic. So the O method is a great way to talk about this topic and bypass all of those censoring bots. And as such, it's become quite a trend on TikTok and other platforms. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, oh my goodness. And you started back in 2009 writing about sex on the internet. It must have been a different world back then. And I'm curious, this is sort of a little aside, but I just want to get your feel for it, because you're right. I mean, that's really one of the biggest obstacles I think we have in terms of being sex educators and trying to post about this topic online, as we get censored and shadow banned. And what was it like in 2009? Did you have as many challenges with it, or was it worse back then? Is it better now? What was it like?
Well, mainly there was no such thing as an influencer back then, and I was mainly doing things for print media. So I've witnessed the death of print media over these years, which is very interesting, because before, like, having an article in a printed magazine had impact, whereas it doesn't really now. It's more about the digital world. So as soon as I got my sort of media collaborations, I abandoned my website. So, and then social media kind of, back in 2009, it was just Facebook, or MySpace, and then these other platforms emerged. But I think I was probably just more on media places. So you got that kind of freedom then with there was no kind of censorship. But then over the years, it's interesting because I thought my first ideal client or reader was a male reader, because I was making content about fetishism, which is quite interesting. I was a fetish model. But then when I shifted to female content, more about orgasm, that just really opened so many doors for me in terms of work and professional opportunities. It's just really interesting.
It is interesting. Why do you think that was the case? When you started writing about the female orgasm, things really shifted.
I think it's kind of cooler or more socially acceptable to talk about female sexual emancipation, whereas with the male sexuality, it's still kind of taboo to talk about men being aroused or consuming certain content. Also, it's kind of a hidden world, the world of fetishism and the kind of content they are consuming. I think it's a massive generalization. But I was very into the kind of fetishism. I've got 50 fetishes on my fetish glossary on my website, and I was interested in that because it goes beyond the kind of tits, ass penetration. It's more nuanced, it's more subtle. For example, being turned on by someone's neck, or a down blouse, or there's just these little jargon terms within fetishism, which I found really interesting. So I was researching it from a kind of psychological point of view. It was super interesting, and even things that don't seem obviously sexual can be sexual. So that's the whole point of fetishism. It's like a sexual response to a non-sexual stimulus. So I find that really interesting, and it's like really reading between the lines. And that kind of male brain, that more observing, that's looking for those details, is something that I find seductive.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so cool. That could be a whole other podcast in and of itself. But I'd love to circle back to the orgasmic manifestation. And so you found yourself in 2018 kind of in a rough spot, and surrounded by several hundred sex toys. So you started to just make use of what you had. And can you tell us a little bit about the process of discovering this, and how did it change for you? What changed for you, and what was the leading thing that contributed to that?
Well, I think it's really important to know that I hit rock bottom. So I was in a situation where the only way was up, and I started to look for self-help content online. And I think these moments of life they can make or break you. And this was something that I'm incredibly grateful for now. So at the time, I didn't even have money to spend on food or even going out. So I struggled to pay €15 for this vegan dinner that I was invited to. And I was so lonely. I thought, do I go? Do I not go? But I just went anyway. And then I thought something has to change in my life. So I started looking for self-help content. I came across the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is the best-selling book of success of all time. It was written in 1937. And in it, there's a chapter called The Mystery of Sex Transmutation. And I was like, oh my God.
I don't remember that chapter in Think and Grow Rich.
Oh my God. It's a lot of people say that to me. They kind of just went past it, and they kind of didn't really get it. But for me as a sexpert, I'd been a sexpert for 9 years at this point. And I was thinking, oh my God, I thought sex was like this house that I knew really well. And suddenly there's a hidden door. There's a whole new room. And I was so eager to discover that room. And it was a whole new understanding of sexual energy. Because what he talked about was how, like in the chapters, I would describe it into two parts. The first part is all about the power of sexual energy and how to transmute, which means not have a sexual action. So when you're horny, for example, to actually have a non-sexual action to kind of direct that energy. So for example, in simple terms, if you are horny, instead of indulging in sex, you would write the book you want to write, go to the gym. So that energy is having a different type of outlet. And the second part of that chapter is all about relationships and having a supportive partner, and how that can really help you in your successful life, which is a very important part of life as well. So it also talks about sexual energy being your magnetism, your charisma, the way you shake someone's hand, how you speak as a public speaker, project your voice, how you dress. So there's all these different ways of optimizing your sexuality and your sexual energy that can be helpful in the world of success.
Yeah, and we so rarely really have that broad of an understanding of the sexual energy as really being the life force energy, really literally like a part of life force. And I'm kind of curious what your take is on like when people lose that, we would call it like low sex drive or low libido. Libido really just means life force energy or zest for life, like it's our lust for life, right? But if people lose contact with that and they lose that sort of driving force, like what's your theory? Do you have a theory on that? And how does that impact somebody's way of being in the world and their ability to, I don't know, manifest what they desire?
Well, I think firstly you have to want to activate it, because I think with couples, for example, when one person's not feeling it, let's imagine they have to want to feel it to actually solve the problem. You know, it can't be just, oh, I'm not horny now, or it's game over. You know, you have to
Right.
have that desire to actually, but also I do believe that, you know, we do have a lot of pressure to be, you know, high performing sexual beings all the time. So I think it's worth listening to your body. And if you feel a bit disconnected, I think there are sensual things that you can tap into, such as guided masturbation tracks or having a massage. There's a lot of ways to tap into sensuality. And I think it's important to, I mean, in my book, I talk about 3 levels of sexuality. The first one is overcoming trauma and shame. And the second level is pleasure and intimacy, which I thought was the top level. And level 3 is healing and sacred sexuality and all these, the fun, really, you know, manifestation. Like, for me, is like the real juice when you're going beyond the, you're transcending the physical body and having this very celestial experience, either with yourself or with a person. That's the kind
Yeah.
of sexuality I'm really into.
Yeah. Well, and I think you have to kind of work through that first stage. You know, we all have certain degrees of big T or little t trauma that's held in the body mind. And it seems to me that really in order to kind of get to some of those different aspects of our sexuality, we kind of have to work through you know, doing some of that inner work. And we can do it through accessing sexual energy and through sex. We can heal trauma and all that, but that trauma can sometimes really get in the way. And I'm curious if did you notice anything about yourself in your own journey with this, you know, discovering this orgasmic manifestation? Did you run into any of that within yourself?
I think I have in my younger years when I was first starting having sex. I think it's interesting because the Me Too movement really shed a light on how much, you know, everyone has a Me Too story. And before that point, whenever I saw something about some kind of abusive situation on the news site, I just didn't read those stories. I was kind of in denial. But now I think that everyone's speaking about these things more openly. It's kind of helped me to kind of accept some of the shadows that I have lived. But also I think I try and look at things in a positive way and just I'm grateful for the awareness that it's brought me, even though it's not condoning anything that's been traumatic in my life, but it's just having that greater awareness, I think. But I've done a lot of work with professionals. I think that's super important. If you're having some kind of sexual trauma or abuse or any type of story of coercion or anything like that, I think it's really important to work with professionals first and foremost.
Yeah. Well, so the O method, is that, did you coin that term? Is that your, or is it
No,
just out there?
I did.
Okay.
No.
That's a good one. So can you talk about that? Like if somebody wanted to try this, I mean, how do you go about doing this practice?
Well, back when I actually discovered it, I discovered the Think and Grow Rich, and I was like, wow, what's this? And he was talking about sex transmutation, which is actually a form of orgasm denial. So there's no actual there's no sexual stimulation, there's no orgasm. So it's just literally transmuting this sexual energy towards a different type of action that's non-sexual. And I thought that sounds great, but I'm a sex toy reviewer, so I'm not denying my orgasm. So I was on a mission to try and find another way. So I googled sexual energy manifestation, and I came across a video by Teal Swan called How to Manifest with Orgasm. And I was like, okay, this is it. And I literally started the next day, and I was thinking of avocados and cashews because they're expensive. So I was kind of salivating, and then the next day I got some random payment that I wasn't expecting, and I could go to the supermarket and buy the avocados and cashews because they're kind of expensive. And so what it is basically it has a whole new, gives masturbation a whole new meaning. So it's not just about feeling pleasure and connecting with your body and having an orgasm. It's about setting an intention, which I find is more meaningful. For example, I want a new apartment, or I want to find love, or I want to find some new business opportunities, things like that. So having that moment of intention, then you indulge in the sexual stimulation, but then it's right when you're about to have an orgasm, you're going back to that intention. So as soon as you're kind of fusing it, imbuing with your orgasm and sending it to the universe. So it's just a beautiful way. That's a very simple way of doing it, but there are different ways. And one way that I started doing, actually, I created my own method called Eroticize Your Desire, because I have a very active imagination. So I was literally eroticizing my desire meant if I wanted to manifest this apartment, I was imagining I was in this apartment and I was receiving the best cunnilingus, you know? So there was a kind of this ideal reality had a sexual component. Or imagine I paid off all of my student loan debts, and I imagined I was naked, feeling the breeze against my body, and I was phoning the student loans company in England saying, "This is my number." And I actually did that, you know. So I was literally eroticizing anything that can be, you know, very non-sexual. I was sexualizing things which were really not.
That's really fascinating, and I would imagine that that can really bring in, and like it energizes the intention in a way. So it's not just a mental, you know how manifestation can sometimes become very like mental. There's just that visualizing aspect, which we know like there's more to it than that, right? So what you're saying is like, yeah, and you eroticize it and bring some of that juicy turn on, pleasurable, erotic energy to a whole scenario that's in your mind, but also in your body. That's cool. I really like that.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I have a whole chapter called that, Eroticize Your Desire. And I give examples because people are thinking, how can paying the mortgage be sexy? But I think there are things that can be erotic, like travel, like a new car, and having a blowjob in your new car. You know, there's a lot of things that we want that you can eroticize. But also what's important is to be aware of the emotion behind the desire. And that's super important in any type of manifestation. It's not just about the thing you want, it's about what it means and how it's going to make you feel. For example, a new home could be bringing you a sense of stability, or it could be a greater commitment with your partner if you're moving in together. But recently I've been really tapping into the feeling in terms of the embodiment of the feeling. And something that I realized that's really important to me is safety. So in terms of, you know, money, love, all of these things, I'm trying to embody the feeling of safety in my body, which feels, just closing your eyes and think, what does safety feel like? It's the opposite of the cortisol, being on edge. It's just grounded, it's expansive, it's like a hug, you know? So I'm just trying to kind of bring in those emotions as much as possible. But I go through phases. There's also, for the people who don't want to have much, let's say, or have the least amount of imagination, there's a technique called sigils, which is kind of common in magic or witchcraft. It's basically making a symbol that represents your desire, and you make it as, for example, you could start with an affirmation like "I'm a money magnet," and you write it out, and then you cross out all the repeating letters, and with the remaining letters, you make this pattern, you jumble them all together, and then you keep simplifying and simplifying until it's just a few squiggles. And you might make 3 and then leave them for a few days and then just pick up one randomly. And you don't remember what it is, but your subconscious does because you've put all that energy into it when you want to make it. So you just look at it while you have an orgasm. So you're not actually interfering with your thought processes during any type of stimulation. So it's really interesting to kind of, you know, vary the different techniques depending on how much you want to ritualize it or not, you know.
Right. And so in your book, like you actually give the like the step-by-step, like if somebody wanted to try this out, you have techniques and approaches people can try in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 4 sections in the book, and the first part is talking about the history of this practice, which is very old. It's, you know, existed for a very long time, the pagan times, Tantra, Taoism. It's a very old practice, plus what it actually is. And then I talk about in the second section is what you want, which is interesting because most people don't really know what they want in life. People know what they don't want. They complain, but how do you craft this wish list? So I have some techniques about that. Then I talk about the basic technique, and then I kind of add things onto it. For example, depending on how much time you've got. I mean, for example, a great thing is to actually have a kind of build-up, like cleaning the space you're in, having a dance, celebratory dance. Oh, I imagine I've got my thing, I've got my manifestation. Or you can journal as well, journaling with manifestation, which is like writing about your ideal scenario as if it's already happened, expressing gratitude, sexual desire potentially. And then I have things like amplifying things with crystals. So, for example, if you want money, then maybe using citrine on your solar plexus while you're having an orgasm for money, or rose quartz for love, etc. And then I have some enhancers, such as working with the lunar cycles as well. So new moon for calling new things in, and then full moons for letting things go. And even essential oils, I have a love potion and a prosperity potion. But all these things can be done without the sexual component. So it's basically, and also binaural beats and solfeggio frequency. So listening to these frequencies of music that really influence our bodies because we are water. So if you want to listen to some music or even affirmations, like masturbating to affirmations is really powerful because
Yeah.
we're in a very like sponge-like state, and it
Yeah.
can be more powerful. And also, what I think is really interesting if you masturbate to affirmations is what is the affirmation when you actually come?
Now, that's funny. I actually have a, excuse me. I have a guided, a guided masturbation audio that I created for some of my clients like years ago, but I have it as like it's part of like a free download packet that I have. And at the end, it's like just guided because sometimes I would get clients like women that were like, I don't even know where to start. So it just guides them very gently through that. And then at the end, I do like downloads and affirmations. And I've had great feedback. Tried it on myself. I'm like, it's really soothing because we are in such a receptive state. But I'm really curious, like, what do you have to have the climax? Because you can run that orgasmic energy, and there's a lot of different types of orgasmic states and orgasms. Does it need to be a certain type of climax or a certain type of orgasm? Does it matter? Do you have to go into that peak climax state in order for this method to work?
Well, actually, I have a chapter in the book called Orgasmic Manifestation Without Orgasm.
Okay.
So I've already thought of this. And I just have this technique, for example, the sex transmutation that Napoleon Hill talked about in Think and Grow Rich. That could be, I think you can combine all methods. For example, sex transmutation can be used in moments where it's not appropriate to masturbate or have sex. For example, if you're on a train and you're having these erotic thoughts, and then you can start, instead of thinking about the fantasies, you can start thinking about the project that you want to manifest or the new collaboration or whatever it is, So you can actually, start direct your thoughts towards something else and this energy through breath, through intention, through meditation. And then another thing which I think is amazing is edging, because edging is kind of a pop. I think we've all done edging without knowing it's called edging. So it's basically taking us to an almost orgasmic point, but then kind of decreasing the intensity to make things last longer and make the orgasm stronger. But what's really powerful is to actually do edging with several edges and then not have the orgasm, and then indulge in that thing you want to do. It's like sex transmutation, but on steroids. It's like very, very powerful. You need a lot of discipline for that. I recommend that when you've not slept well, you need a coffee, like having the sexual stimulation and then stopping.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing practice. And I think that too many people are resistant to that idea. I think because our
not having the
bodies...
orgasm, you mean?
Yeah, I did that with years ago when I went through my whole sexual awakening in 2011. And, little while after my awakening, I did attract a lover into my life. And that was one of the things that I was working with that on myself. Like during my self-pleasure, I would do that. I would build myself up and I would just take a break. And then in partnered practice, he was super open to learning and trying new things. And so he decided to take it on along with me because I was still wanting to sometimes not go all the way for the climax. And I was just working with sort of a different way of being in my body. And I found that to be just one of the most energizing practices. And you still feel so connected and in this love loop with your partner. It just keeps that magnetic energy just there and alive in just some other kind of way. So I think that it's so underrated. And I think we're too obsessed with like getting to the finish line and or like the habit. I think orgasm or climax can really just become a habit that can be very hard to like undo that habit of just letting the body go there every time. But there's so much on the other side of it. I mean, even for women, I noticed drastic differences when I would not let myself go all the way over the edge and versus the times where I would experiment and I would let myself go over the edge. Like I would do like for 3 weeks, not climax. And then I would go and I would notice like a really big difference after I did, and even a difference in how the orgasm came about. If I really went for it, it had sort of not as great a side effects as if it just sort of came out of nowhere and happened by itself. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I think that people don't realize that all these different types of orgasms that we have and how we enter into them can really impact the way that we feel about ourselves and about our partner and about the world.
I think it's very good to have a lot of experimentation. And also in the book, I talk about results. For example, I encourage keeping a magical diary. So you're writing down the date, the intention of the orgasm, maybe potentially as well the lunar cycle and menstrual day as well, just to see. So you can actually track what's working and the method you've used. So you can actually see what's working best for you. So I think it's interesting to have this, to experiment with different methods
I love
and then
that.
see which ones are the most powerful.
Yeah, and pleasurable. Let's talk about pleasure for a
Mm.
minute and the role of pleasure. Why is pleasure so important, do you think?
I think I've got this phrase on my desk now, and I've go where you feel the most alive. I think orgasm and food and travel, it's about aliveness. I think that's what brings the juice to life. So it's about, and I think pleasure, and especially the pleasure of orgasm, it's the only moment when we're actually purely present.
Mm-hmm.
Where we want time to slow down. Where we're not wishing our time away. So I think it's about that moment of all I want to be is here right now, and it's real pure presence. And there's not many moments in life where we've experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the thing. I think pleasure is also a guide, but I think a lot of people say to be guided by pleasure, but I think there's a bit of a danger line there, because sometimes
Yeah.
pleasure can get into excess. And you have to know which
Mm-hmm.
kind of pleasures are. Is it sustainable? That's something
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
a really good point.
Mm.
I think that's why a lot of people are sort of scared of that word. Or I have noticed that anyway, as I've
Mm-hmm.
been, doing this work for a long time. And the name of my business is Pathway to Pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of a lot of taboo around the word pleasure and a lot of negative connotations with it. Have you found that as well in your work?
I think so. I think people think about instant gratification, and for me, I try and express my sexuality as being something that's not McDonald's. It's not McDonald's. I would say that's kind of Tinder and porn and that type of fast thing. Whereas I'm trying to promote something very different, more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we spoke on my podcast, we talked
Yeah.
about crying. I think remember we
Oh,
remember that.
yes.
But we
Yeah,
talked about
I do. I remember.
orgasms.
Like
Like,
crying into orgasm or crying because you don't know when you'll get your next one or have your next lover.
I've just had lunch with the guy I had sex with last night, and that's why I'm in a red dress right now. And I was explaining to him like why I cried, what it meant to me. It's like, were you in pain? I was like, no, no. It's kind of like not that you should ever do this, but as if you imagine you put your finger in a plug socket, and you're like, whoa, you're like plugged into the source. This is just such a beautiful experience. I think through penetration, I feel like it's a portal to God.
Oh, yeah,
And I
for
feel
sure.
that so much, and I want to promote this type of sexuality, this type of power. That's why sex is so taboo, because of the power. That's why
Right.
sex magic is taboo.
Yeah.
People wanted to get us into this kind of just let's just procreate, but there's sexuality goes way beyond procreation. There's much more to it.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was so shamed by the church and made to be some evil thing, because if people are in alignment with that and in their power and in a healthy relationship with that life force energy, I mean, we are so powerful. And so as a way to control, that has been really hidden, and it's been done a lot through shame and fear. Even today, there's so much of that. And I think it's too bad, because it's been now just relegated to, the more mystical power, which is fine. I think that's the way it's meant to be, but there's still so much shame and taboo around sex in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the religious shaming that shuts down our sexual life force energy.
But also on the other side, I think this false sense of liberation is not helpful either. I think just because if you dress a certain way, listen to certain types of music, or even watching music videos, I wouldn't say that is particularly liberating. It's taking something precious and making it into McDonald's or something very vulgar and accessible.
What would your definition be of sexual liberation? Because I've been thinking, this has been on my mind. Someone just asked me that. I was a guest on someone else's podcast recently, and that it was a question to that effect. And it's really made me think about really like, what is that? And I think we all can have our own answers for it, but I'm curious what your definition might be of that, because I think that's really important.
I think sexuality is a very personal expression. So I wouldn't like to say that mine is better or anything like that. I just think it's a very personal expression. And I think you have to know yourself to know what your expression and perspective is on it. I think for me, it's just something very, very powerful, very sacred. I like the SEX, sacred energy exchange. I love that definition of sex. I think meaningful sex is always best, personally. It's not always easy to find that, but
What does that mean for you, meaningful sex?
It doesn't always have to be in the context of love, but something that helps me to transcend the physical. I want to transcend the physical.
Yeah.
And I've always been into that even before I was spiritual. I always felt like I wanted to, because I used to be quite into fetishism and BDSM in my formative years. And that was a way of accessing the intellectual side of sexuality. Not talking about pain or anything like that, but more kind of power dynamics, because it's a very mental thing. Having role plays where you're having this wit battle and you're getting so wet, but if no one's touched you yet, that kind of thing's super hot, the sapiosexual energy. And then now that I'm in a more spiritual place, I think of it more of the soul and the heart. So when something goes beyond the in out, shake it all about, and you're going to like more like a place of the feeling is not just in the body.
Yeah, like you're in other realms, like
absolutely.
other dimensions. Do you think that that can also happen for the BDSM and fetish kink realm, that it can also have spiritual transcendent aspects
for
to
sure.
it? Yeah.
And I think that BDSM is already transcendent because it's in the mind. I think a lot of it is in the mind.
Yeah.
So I think you absolutely can. And for me now, I'm not really into that kind of power dynamic anymore, because I just realized everyone's intention is different. But I realized for me, wanting to be the femdom, it was more about feeling, it's more an ego trip, I think. Whereas now I don't really need that now. I feel like a goddess anyway. I don't need someone to, worship my feet to feel like a goddess. I just am a goddess. So it's more of a celebration of equals, I think, for me now. But I still appreciate the sensual side of it, and there's no end. For example, in a lot of my content where I've spoken about there being a sexual sequence, which is very monotonous. For example, it starts off with kiss, caress, undress, optional oral sex, penetration, male orgasm, game over. And that's how 95% of sexual encounters are like that, with big emphasis on the penetration.
Yeah.
But I think with fetish stuff like foot worship or other types of things, there's no end. It's not about orgasm. It's just about a constant tease, and you're taking away parts of that sequence, like the penetration and the orgasm, and then you're getting into these realms of massive imagination and creativity. And imagination is a very important part of manifestation as well as sexuality. Even Napoleon Hill has a whole chapter about imagination. It's super important.
I'm gonna have to go. I've read that book like over 20 years ago. I'm gonna have to go read it again just to look up this chapter that I completely don't remember. I think I remember the one on imagination, but the sex part. Well, awesome. So tell our listeners about your book, where the name of the book, where they can find it, and also how everybody can get a hold of you and learn more.
Okay, it's called Orgasmic Manifestation, Transform Your Life with Your Sexual Energy. We have a nice vagina on the front, like a portal to pleasure. And I've talked a lot about masturbation in here, but there is one chapter about partner. It's called Multiply the Magic, which I don't really usually do it as a partnered thing, but I'll just read like one paragraph from this, because I think you'll appreciate this, because it's about my vision of sexuality. Right? Sharing is caring. So this is like, I wanted to kind of convey this to the world about how I see sexuality. Because when you go to an art class and you're all drawing the same thing, it could be, let's say, a vase of flowers, or it could be a nude person. It's interesting how every single person has a different painting or drawing with the same stimulus. And I think that sexuality is the same. I think we all have different perspective. Anyway, this is mine on sexuality or sex. I've always perceived the act of penetration as a magical moment, particularly when a deep emotional bond emerges between the lovers. It is an intimate dance, a sublime fusion in which two bodies intertwine to form a single entity, exploring the depth of their connection and channeling the energy of a celestial force together. It is an almost indescribable experience imbued with pure and enigmatic magic. That's just what sex is beautiful for me in a nutshell.
I love it. That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with before we wrap up for today?
No, I'd love you all to buy my book. That would be amazing.
And it's on Amazon? Is that the best spot to get it?
It's on Amazon, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
As always, thank you so much for being my guest today at the Sex Talk Cafe.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for the Sex Talk Cafe. Please be sure to leave a 5-star review, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends. And if you're ready to discover the 3 secrets to deepening connection, enhancing pleasure, and expanding your orgasmic potential, then be sure to grab your copy of the Pleasure Keys ebook at pleasurekeys.com. To learn more about my private coaching, couples retreats, and other offerings, be sure to connect with me at pathwaytopleasure.com or find me on social media at Susan Morgan Taylor. Thank you again so much for joining me today for the Sex Talk Cafe.